We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt Podcast. On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, Money Myths.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I've got George back with me this week. Welcome, George.
George Cabela, your financial coach. What's up, Sean?
And we have a guest for you this week. Now, we already recorded the interview, so I need to give some love to our sponsors. I need to talk to George for a little bit, and then I need to do the introduction of our guest, and then we'll get into the meat of the episode. So if you're listening, please hang out with us for a little bit here. First thing I want to do is talk about our first sponsor, Sam Cohen with Attorneys First Insurance. Those of you that have listened for any length of time know how big a friend of the show Sam is with Attorneys First. He writes errors and omissions insurance for attorneys and title companies all over the country. Now, one thing that Sam was saying to me is that he can write for attorneys and title companies even if they've had a previous claim. So even if you have somebody, or you are an attorney, or you own a title company, or you know an attorney, or know someone that owns a title company, and they're a little afraid about getting a malpractice quote because they've had a claim against them in the past, Sam can still find them a policy that either is affordable, or he can talk to them about the different options that they might have. So don't let the fact that there's been a previous claim stop someone from talking to Sam. The other sponsor I want to talk about, since we've already recorded the guts of our episode, is Mark Purvis, our wonderful editor who edits out the spaces, edits out the ums, edits out the ahs. Can't really edit out me sounding like a fool, but he can edit out the rest of the stuff. But he's got a website called LegacySpotlight.com. And so, what would it be like to capture your family stories for future generations? What would it be like if you could go back and listen to stories from previous generations about what happened in your family's past, or what your lineage is, or just preserving some of the wisdom of some of those previous or future generations? Well, that's what LegacySpotlight.com is. So if you want to have a fun family recording session, you can go to LegacySpotlight.com. You can contact Mark through that website, and he will help you preserve all of those memories. But welcome back, I guess I would say in studio, but we're really in my office. We're not really in a studio.
It's a beautiful studio. But
So the last time we recorded was right after PodFest. It was right after you got back from your vacation. I know that coming back from PodFest, there were a lot of people that had tested positive for COVID, and so we just wanted to be, I didn't, knock on wood, but we wanted to be just extra careful, so we recorded on Zoom. But George is back, so how you doing?
I'm doing well. I got to say, I did come back from vacation. So you came from PodFest and, got all this kind of stuff. I came back and my daughter was like, hey, Dad, here's a cold. So I forgot in this time and day and age that you can still get sick by the regular common cold. And that thing knocked me out for about 2 weeks, but I'm feeling better and just enjoying to be here. That's for sure.
It knocked you out in the middle of the interview, too.
That too, it did.
So definitely listen for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, the lung was coming out. It was trying to.
So on this week's episode, we interviewed Rachel Nolgren with Raymond James Financial, actually with Mustard Seed Advisors of Raymond James Financial. So Rachel began her financial services career in 2005 with Raymond James' rotational training program designed for college graduates. She went on to become a product development manager with Retirement Solutions Initiatives, a role that gave her the opportunity to collaborate with financial advisors on all aspects of retirement income planning. In 2011, she decided to use the experience she gathered working closely with advisors in order to become an advisor herself. She earned her Series 7 securities license, joined Mustard Seed Advisors in 2011. In 2017, she became a partner in Mustard Seed Advisors as part of long-term succession planning for the team and for their clients. She's a native of St. Pete. She graduated from Eckerd College with degrees in economics and Spanish. She enjoys volunteering with local organizations, practicing Nia and yoga, dancing, paddleboarding, and spending time with her son Declan and her family. Her website is mustardseedadvisors.com. Her email address is rachel.nolgren@raymondjames.com, which is NOHLGREN. So rachel.nolgren@raymondjames.com. George had some really good questions for her. We talked to Rachel all about money myths, especially some of the younger generation. There's a lot of get off my lawn moments in this week's episode, but we talk about the younger generation and we talk about some money myths. And I don't know, George, if there's anything you want to add.
No, and just talking about, how do we talk to the kids itself? So, I mean, we're raising kids now to try to be responsible adults with money. And, it's like, where do we start and what happens
Right.
from that lessons we have with our 9-year-olds to the point of like teenagers and of course young adults. So it was a definitely interesting conversation.
Yeah, it was a fun interview. So I will sign off for now. The next thing you'll hear, our editor, Mark, will splice together the interview. It'll be seamless, giving away some behind the scenes, behind the curtain tactics here. But here is our interview with Rachel. So welcome, Rachel. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk to you initially about a lot of money myths. And I know George had a lot of questions, and I'm actually kind of looking forward to just sitting back and watching you and George have this conversation. But I know there are a lot of myths around money. And I think one of the things that struck me in communicating prior to recording the episode, I've got 2 young kids, 10 and 8, about to be 8 as we record this. He'll be 8 by the time this comes out. So I've got 2 really young kids. But why is it so hard to get some of the younger generations to invest and to save and to do some of that stuff?
It's a question that is for the ages, and I wish there were an easy solution. For kids your age, and I have a 7-year-old, so we're right in the same boat there. What I noticed with my son is that money can be very intangible and theoretical. So he grasped the idea of nickels, dimes, quarters, and dollar bills, and he grasped what he can buy at the store, and that his money will stretch farther at Walmart than Target. So there's some concepts he can tangibly interact with. But when it comes to things like college savings, which I have already started a conversation with him about, it's like right over the head. And the interesting thing is that I see that same reaction when I'm sitting in front of a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, or even 70-year-old. And so if we could solve the mystery of where in brain development can we find that inflection point of talking about things that are theoretical and having it click for people, then we will help solve this challenge. I have heard others that study this more closely than I have suggested that brain development period is between age 15 and 30. So like teenage years and the quarter life years. And we don't have good financial literacy programs, although the state of Florida just passed financial literacy. So maybe that's going to start changing. I know.
I saw that.
Big hoorah for the state of Florida.
For sure.
So brain-wise, academics say we're ready for financial literacy in that age range, and that's the crucial time to develop such that money becomes more real and less theoretical, and people have better habits.
Yeah, I got to say that I recently did some seminars with some kids, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. What surprised me in there, and this is where I think you were hitting on it too, is just this. They know to save. They know to spend money. They have that concept itself. I think the question too, though, is where do we lose that? Where do we, you're right, because, at that age, it's like, I'm not worried about college. I'm just worried about, what am I doing this summer? But where is it that we lose this concept of, as we get closer to high school ages, 15, 16 years old, what happens there? And I think that's I don't know if you have an answer, but it's really more of just trying to understand where do we lose that?
Well, what I was going to say is the delayed gratification. In other words, if I invest X amount of dollars a month today, I'm not going to see it until I retire. And if I'm 20, that's 45 years away. And when we start talking about, $500 a month today becomes $1 bajillion, Isn't it when you get to
Right.
so many zeros and commas, it just doesn't even seem to be a real number anymore?
I'd agree. It's not something you can get your brain around at any age. George, there is a loss. There's a loss in the teenage and adult years of this yearning to learn about money or the things that my parents do. I've had the experience. I'd love for you guys to jump in. Teenagers and young adults, when they first start working and they get that first pay stub, assuming it's like, above the table work, and they get totally bored, totally glazed over about FICA taxes, Social Security, Medicare tax, 401k, often just ignore it, don't start putting into it. And some of that's probably just avoidance behavior, which unfortunately they might be learning from their parents, that it's okay to do that. And that's a big issue too.
I don't know, Sean, I got to tell you though, your theory of retiring 45, 65 is that the age? I want to retire earlier than that, but that's the other thing that I've seen some of our youngsters today are like, I want to retire at 35. So I don't know where you're saying I got to wait until I'm 45 years.
I think I picked 65 because that's the age you can start pulling from your 401k, 65 and a half. But yeah, my wife asks me all the time, when do you want to retire? And my answer is always the same, yesterday.
Yesterday. I know, right? All about financial freedom. I've been hearing that theme in your podcast, financial freedom.
Right.
When my clients turn 60, often there's this like, okay, this is way longer than I ever wanted to work. And one of our jokes is, at age 60, you're too young for Medicare and too old for women to care.
Oh, I love that. All right.
So that means we need to stay married to our respective spouses.
I'll take that as a good advice.
Yeah.
So that's a common one for levity. But the Age Lab out of MIT, they have a study that it goes in cycles of 8,000 days, I believe it is. So their thesis is that none of us, not even kids and not even adults, we can't think out further than 8,000 days, which is, and that's essentially saying like, we can't plan for 15 years ahead. Yeah, we have software to do it. We've got people like me that'll do these projections, but it's just not something that makes sense in our brains. And there's so many variables that change. So that's difficult too.
The other thing that sort of brings up, we talked a little bit, again, pre-interview about get rich quick and cryptocurrency. And I made the comment that I invested $100 bucks that ended up growing to $150 and is now worth all of $37 in cryptocurrency. Especially when you talk about the younger generation, TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Facebook Live and all these things. And you have people thinking to themselves, well, why do I need to work? Why do I need to do a 9 to 5? I can just go onto Instagram and get a bajillion followers, and then I'll be rich and I won't have to do anything.
Yeah, and we have some next gen clients, like grandkids of clients, who are making money that way.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to say that they're wrong. I will make some comments about get rich quick schemes.
Well,
if it's okay with you too. Let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean to imply that they're wrong either. I think where I'm coming from is it's really hard to do in such a way that you are able to monetize it quickly and for a lot of money. I mean, my 8-year-old comes to me all the time. Let's do an Instagram Live. Let's do an Instagram Live. And I'm willing to do it and I'm willing to encourage it, but I know that he's not going to make $1 million tomorrow because we post an Instagram Live.
I mean, we could be athletes too,
Yeah,
right? Isn't that the dream too?
Yeah.
It's like, that's the same
Yes.
thing.
I'm going to pay for soccer lessons for my older son. It's my retirement plan is to make him rich playing sports.
No, that's exactly the metaphor. I mean, for us, the parental generation, that is the metaphor, because that's what was trendy and one of kind of the get rich quick way to wealth when we were growing up. And now it's this whole social media generation, but it's the same metaphor in my mind. So we've got a generation of people younger than us that think, oh, social media, anybody can do this. I think it's the same as sports. You have to put so many hours and resources into it. And the market is already flooded, right? Like, it may have been an easy get rich quick 5 or 10 years ago, but now the market is flooded with people doing this and helping their kids do it. And the more you have people in a marketplace, the harder it is to make money in that marketplace.
But I'm going to tell you in 30 seconds how to save or get rich or do these kind of things, and you'll learn it behind some great music. So, that's how we're being, sold with a lot of this stuff as well. But it's like, how do you combat that though? As in what you do from an advisor perspective itself, I'm learning something in 30 seconds. How does that compare to the advice that you would want to give to some of the folks that you're dealing with and potential clients and clients?
Well, so to be clear, I am currently lobbying Raymond James Compliance to be able to get on TikTok and some of these platforms so I can also do 30-second sound bites.
Exactly. Get some good 30-second
all day long. All day long. It is an accessible, engaging thing. But the sound bite then has to tie back to something real, something that has merit, something that has more context. So I'll take a financial plan. I'm a financial planner, and so a financial plan typically takes at least 1 hour of work to put together, and sometimes more, depending on how complex it is. And then you have this framework for how to live life and how to save. Well, I could probably create 30-second sound bites under that one umbrella, but they're not as meaningful as an individual sound bite as they are when they're tied together. And to go back to sports, let's just say a nutritionist or a sports coach is putting out some TikToks, 30 seconds here or there. No athlete, no professional athlete who's serious about their body is going to go take that 30-second advice and say, well, this is everything, and I'm not going to do any more digging or research on this. This is the only thing I'm going to do for my body. It's just the start of maybe learning something new.
Yeah, that's what I do with the lemon juice and water. That's it.
My wife does that every morning. Squeezes some lemon into the hot water, and I'm like,
it works, man.
I'll just drink lemonade. I'm good. What's the answer, or where do we go from here? I mean, I want to encourage my kids, and I want to encourage the younger generation. I don't want to, and I realize as I was initially leading into this line of questioning, I sounded like that, get off my lawn, old man, and that really wasn't. That really wasn't my intention to sound that way, because with the podcast, I am kind of in this space of social media and influencer and just came back from Podfest where there were a ton of these people at that event. So what's the answer? How do we bridge the gap there? How do we convey the message?
I think we have to first embrace social media. All three of us do that. We got to meet our kids. Or just our young clients, right? I'm 40, so even a client that's 25 is like a whole generation away from me. We have to embrace it, meet them where they are, and when we see egregious bad advice, we got to call it out and have a voice in that space. I mean, put a 30-second sound bite out about, why not put 100% your money in crypto or anything else that's trendy. Trendy stuff's been around for hundreds of years. It's not necessarily something you go all in on. Maybe you put a toe in or a foot in, but not the whole body. So I think we have to break in the space and have a voice. And then I'm not the person to deliver their message necessarily. So like on our team, one of the things we're looking to do is bring on some younger advisors and influencers who can engage, because I'm never going to learn how to be so engaging on TikTok or any space, or whatever the next version is, where I'm going to connect with an 18-year-old new adult. So I think we have to embrace it rather than fight it. And then the other piece is I've come across a lot of young kids and young adults both who value reading. So I don't know why this is, but along with all these like vintage clothes and vintage records and, oh man, I love this song. And I'm like, yeah, that song was a cool song when I was in high school. All this vintage things. They love newspapers, magazines, and books, like hard books, because it's just something different. There's a book that Zach, my business partner, that we've read and we often cite with clients. It's called The Psychology of Money, and it's like not jargon. It's storytelling, and it's really easy language that I would say probably as young as 13 or 14, teenager, all the way through retiree could pick up that book and learn a lot. And it would tie a lot of these sound bites together into something real. And then I'll end with a shameless plug for your podcast, because I think you guys talk about real issues, and you talk for 30 or 40 minutes at a time, and it gives you a lot to chew on, not just something quick and just well thought out. So those kinds of resources are helpful.
Well, I don't know about the well thought out part, but we'll take it.
I was going to say thank you, and you're welcome back on the show anytime you want.
I got a money myth for you itself that seems. So I messaging to the kids, these kind of things is one of those. But what about? And I've heard this a lot. It takes money to make money, and of course I've seen some things where it's like, I'm going to go into debt. I'm going to use credit to make money and do these kind of things. Obviously, with flipping homes, everybody's got an opinion in regards to that. But what's your take on that concept itself? Like, I know we've got to invest, we take some risks, but when I'm coming in as a client, young client is like, I'm going to use my credit card and to buy crypto. Like, what goes through your mind as an advisor?
Yikes. Person. Yikes. I think, oh gosh, I hope they don't end up, hiring Sean because they've gone way overboard.
Right.
Oh, I do.
You're okay with
that. I know.
I'm totally cool
that's
with that.
That's where our interests are misaligned. I do not like the idea of credit cards to buy anything in the investment realm. I think that clients, even young ones, need to have some cash, a little bit of cash on hand, 1 to 2 months worth of what their expenses are in case they have a job loss or a disability event. I was in a car crash when I was really young, and it set me way back, which is one of the reasons I'm here today and in this field. I was not well prepared as a 22-year-old to deal with that. So cash and then credit lines, like those are the emergency things that credit lines should be used for, especially high interest ones. I don't like 401k loans either for investment, and I don't like margin. There are some forms of debt that could be smart. They're more fixed rate that you could use to buy another home. So I'm no expert on real estate, but once you own one property and you're in a healthy housing market where you're going to buy the next piece of property, I've seen our clients use home equity lines or loans against their portfolio to do that. And at a low rate, it makes sense. So I'm not anti credit line or anti debt when you're just saying, rule of thumb, I don't agree with this. It's just, you got to be selective and be careful about how much interest you're accruing. The other question or myth about you have to have money to become wealthy, or is that fair how I framed it? Like, you have to have money to make money. That's even easier. What I would say for a younger audience is that mantra really comes from an older generation. It's not really fair to the younger generation. It comes from money that's been passed down through families for long periods of time at big scale, and it's not very relevant for those of us that work for a living, earn, and save out of our hard-earned money. So I think it's kind of stale. And I would encourage, for the democratization of money, I would encourage younger investors to say, well, once I've met my cash reserve, let's say that's $5,000, I can then invest. And invest today and get started. Even starting small helps, because when you're young, time is on your side and you can really accumulate a lot of wealth.
What occurred to me was maybe even a different take on the question is, if I'm making, let's say, $40,000 right out of college, well, I have to pay rent, I have to pay student loans, I have to pay my cell phone bill, my car bill, gas, groceries. When I get to 50,000, then I'll start to invest. And then when I get to 50, it's when I get to 70, I'll start to invest. And then when I get to 70,000, when I hit six figures, I'll start to invest. So how do you combat something like that? I don't necessarily want to go the other extreme and say, do that other guy that I won't mention that's really famous for helping people get out of debt that says, just go home and eat rice and beans all day and peanut butter sandwiches.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, you don't want to go to that extreme, but what about the concept of, well, when I get to X salary, then I'll have enough to invest?
Yeah, I think that's really flawed. I'm so glad you brought that up. You have talked on a recent podcast about the pressures to put on the mask and to keep up with the Joneses and spend at a certain level. And if you're spending at that level, what you just described is exactly what will happen. I need to get to 40, then I need to get to 50. I just have to keep earning more income and then I can save. And you fall in that trap. It never happens. It's a behavioral thing, and the habit has to start early to be impactful, even if it's just 5%. So if I'm earning $40,000 a year and I'm saving $2,000 of it, it's a start. And when you're young, especially when the market's down like it is now, there's a lot of opportunity there. So I think forming the habit is more important than the dollars and cents. I don't know about the two of you, but I started off, I'm not going to disclose when because it's a long time ago, but I started off earning in yesteryear, like 25 grand, which is probably today's 40 grand. And I started a Roth. It was like one of the first years you could do a Roth. And it was nothing, it was like $500 for that year, but it was a habit. Now I can look back and say to my clients, not just textbook, but real, my Roth is worth this today because I started way back then. You can't just always be chasing income thresholds. You have to form the habit at any level.
And I was going to say, something similar as well in terms of, for me, it's always been take it out of the paycheck automatically. So right now I do. I designate a portion of my salary comes to me, and then a portion of my salary goes into savings. And because it's not in my checkbook, I never see it. I never feel it. It's not there. And so it just automatically comes out. I don't see it. I don't deal with it. I learn to live without it. And it either goes into savings or investments or whatever.
Exactly. And then you don't miss it. It's automated. It's happening behind the scenes. You go live your life the way you want to live your life. In the corporate world, we have a structure for it with 401ks, and a lot of those plans can increase what you're putting in as you make more money. So it's truly set it and forget it. But when you run your own business, I know this is very hits home for all three of us. When you run your own business, you have to check in more frequently and make sure you're keeping up. That savings program aligns with your income.
I do it every year. How often should I be doing it?
Once a year.
Okay.
As you get closer to retirement, as you get within 5 years of retirement, twice a year, or with some of our clients, they're so paranoid it's like every month right now. And I don't blame them because they just saw things take a hit. But right now, once a year.
Okay. So good. I'm doing it right.
You're winning.
I'm doing it right. So what other myths do you have, George?
I like how you touched upon the, I got to wait till I make a certain amount of money itself. But the other thing, too, is I can't work with an advisor until I'm making money, or I've got to make a certain amount of money itself. I know there's a lot of fear when it comes to working with advisors itself. It's like, well, maybe I'm not making enough to be able to get that advice. What do we do with that? Like, how do I approach, coming to someone like you to be able to get that help that I might be needing, depending on where I'm at in my, wealth building, process?
What a good question, and how timely, because things are becoming every year more accessible for all kinds of investors or online trading platforms where you might not even need an advisor.
Right.
When people come to us, there's a lot of shame and fear around it. And for 10 plus years now, I've wondered why. Like, I consider myself very doors open, very kind of professorial. If you're not the right client, that's okay. I'll educate you and you'll move on to the next person. And I think what happens is exactly what you just described, that either the internal narrative or something that person's been told by a parent, a grandparent, a mentor, something is in their mind saying, I have to have X, Y, Z to go hire an advisor. And right now, I'm going to take a little side note. I'm going to apologize for all financial planners and the industry. I'm going to apologize for what we've done as an industry that I see is changing now, which is this concept of account minimum. You have to have X to hire us. I get why that's real for corporations like Raymond James, the one I work for. There's profitability in the mix, and the structure has been set up for the traditional wealthy person in America, landowners, farmers, like where wealth was created in yesteryear. And so there's been this steady flow of clients that have, let's say, $100,000 plus right out the gate when they come hire us. And that stigma still hangs in the air, like smoke. And some of us are willing to work with young clients as long as the young client has good habits and is willing to save and trust us. And so I feel like this is all changing very quickly with the next generation of advisors. Hopefully 20 years from now, we won't have to ask that question on a podcast, right? Because there won't be as much shame around it,
So if I come to you itself, you won't laugh that hard. That's what you're trying to tell me. Okay, I'm okay with that. I just want to because that's the like my mother already laughs at me. So let's not have you come to the mix. That would be really hurtful. But we're good.
I'm a thousandaire. Yay! Thank you, Rachel. We appreciate you being on the show. Any other myths that you want to tackle, George? Any other myths that you want to grill her about?
I'm trying to figure out, but no, I think, obviously the importance of savings, the importance of, having a good plan itself to be in place itself. But I mean, is there anything else you think like, hey, I'm starting out on my journey, is there anything else that we need to keep in mind when it comes to, this beautiful process of wealth building?
Sure. I'm going to end with a couple Rachel mantras and one Zach mantra. So Zach's my business partner. His mantra, when's the best time to get invested, is yesterday.
Right.
And that was really hard for people to hear 6 months ago. Now it's a little easier because stocks are on sale, and real estate, not necessarily, but maybe in another few years that'll be on sale too. And then the Rachel mantra is all about automated savings, as Sean just said. I like storytelling. It's what people gravitate towards. So our other team member, Kimberly, who's our service associate, she is getting towards retirement age. I'm not going to disclose her age, but she did start her career with saving $25 per paycheck. $25.
Wow.
And she's been disciplined, and then she's followed all the advice. And oftentimes I tell her, you do better than advisors do. You should be the advisor. But she doesn't want to be. But she has come from a really humble background. She's from Alaska. She has not had a job where she's, been a millionaire. She's worked really hard, and she has set herself up to retire early. So let's, celebrate that. If she do that through the high inflation of the 70s and 80s, then, we can do it too. And it's possible.
That gives me hope.
Yeah, it gives me hope too. Yeah, thank you. So I guess that'll do it. Thank you, Rachel. We really, really appreciate you being on this week's episode of the podcast. I will give out your information again. I'll put it in the notes, but your website is mustardseedadvisors.com. Actually, I need to ask one more question. Do you know how the firm was named mustardseedadvisors.com? Or Mustard Seed Advisors, actually?
Yes. Another hopeful place for us to end. Zach and I have two former business partners. One's retired, one is about to retire. And they named the team Mustard Seed Advisors for two reasons. One, they envisioned having younger advisors come along because they support young people getting involved in money. They did not want it to be a string of last names so that people like Zach and I could come along and participate. The other reason is a value. It's a value thing. So under that umbrella, we have a tagline. You'll see it in our emails. It says, "From the smallest of seeds, grow the biggest of trees," which speaks simply to a lot of what we've been talking about today.
Nice. So again, it's mustardseedadvisors.com. Rachel's email is her name, rachel.nolgren@raymondjames.com. And Nolgren is NOHLGREN. But again, for those of you that can't write it down, it'll be in the notes. You can find her contact information in there. Thank you very much, Rachel. We appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you. And I guess that'll do it for this week's episode. And you know what I realized I didn't say at the end of the last couple episodes, I think, is that the tagline of the show is that we hope that at the end of the month you have more money rather than at the end of the money you have more month. Thanks again, Rachel, and we will talk to you all in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.